Good evening, Dr. Burkett. I hope you're enjoying yourself in Florida while social distancing. You already know my name. I'm Dean Boyd. I'm a third of Team Epistemology. And today, along with my colleagues Grady Hill and Frederica Smith, we're going to be speaking on the influence.
Motion detected at the front door.
Give me just a second here. There's motion at my front door. We're going to be speaking on the influence that implicit bias has on how pre-service teachers view and teach students within urban education. It's an interesting topic in education that's been amplified in society as we watch Black Lives Matter play out before us in the news and in some cases in our own neighborhoods. Typically, whatever is going on in society at any given era is in history is also affecting education, where education or the educational ecosystem finds itself to be an imitation of life. And the issues of 2020 are not exempt from this same pattern. At the end of the day, minorities are asking that their voices be heard without judgment, whether that be in the White House or in the schoolhouse. And it's not just Black lives, but it's also it's lives of people of color. But the movement in and of itself is called Black Lives Matter. So in education, my colleagues and I asked the question, what influence do the implicit biases of pre-service teachers have on the instructional strategies that they use when teaching a diverse group of students? So our research question attempts to operationalize a very small degree of what it means to teach for social justice and possibly provide a scope for the request of reparations within urban education. And so hopefully our research and research question can provide a foundation for hearing the voice of all people. But we start off by breaking down beliefs, epistemological beliefs. So if I were in church, I'd tell you to turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, what are epistemological beliefs? So Dr. Burkett, if you do that for me, I'd appreciate it. Turn to your wife and say, honey, what are epistemological beliefs? I am going to believe that you actually did that. Epistemological beliefs are a collage of different dynamics that make up the reality of what your truth is. So to put it another way, in the 1990s, there was or 1980s, there was a political strategist by the name of Lee Atwater. He coined the phrase, perception is reality. Perception is reality. What he was saying was that reality is based on what is believed, regardless of the truth. With perception, what you do in repetition becomes your persuasion. Knowledge, on the other hand, is objectified by fact. So in one of the scholarly articles that we read, 2001, Belief, Knowledge, and Science Education, the author says that knowledge can be obtained by proving or can be certified by others. The reality of society is that most beliefs are relegated to emotions, and the perceptions of individuals without vetting that data is a lot of times as our truth, not the actual fact. Because there are numerous phenomena that shape our beliefs. You can have two people that live in the same household, see the same exact thing day by day by day by day. And if you ask them a question about how they were raised, they're going to tell you two different things based on their beliefs. So your epistemological beliefs belong to you, and they represent your understanding or what you understand knowledge to be and what learning to be. All right, I'm going to go a little deeper. So let's take the beliefs and the perceptions of men based on an African American woman. We'll call her Tanya. She was brought up by nothing but men, brother, cousin, uncle, father, no women in her life. If you ask her what her beliefs are of who men are, she can only give you an absolute understanding of men based on her experiences. And that's what she's going to articulate. But if you take a white woman, Sarah, who was raised by both mother and father, and there's a balance of gender in their life, she can tell you or speak about similar experiences with men that she's faced as a woman in America. But Sarah's understanding of Tanya's biases of men is only limited by her own experience and her own norms in contrast to that of Tanya. Just being a woman is not enough of an experience for Sarah to fully understand Tanya's biases of men based on her epistemological beliefs. So from here, I'm going to pass the ball over to my man Grady Hill, and he's going to talk a little bit more about epistemological beliefs.
Motion detected at the front door.
Hey, looks like Grady's at my front door. Roll that beautiful beam footage.
Hello, I'm Grady Hill, and I am going to discuss the literature review of our paper, Epistemological Beliefs.
All right, Grady, we're going to dive right in with some questions about the lit review. The majority of your work was on the literature review within this research. So what are the scholars saying about biases in the classroom? And are the researchers just talking about race when it comes to biases?
So when we talk about what the literature says in regards to the beliefs of pre-service teachers before they actually teach in the classroom, what we're really discussing is implicit bias and how that bias affect teaching practices in the classroom. Upon my research, I found that there are several factors that play into implicit bias. The first one is childhood upbringing, family environment, emotional events, and the media. So this was coming from the research that we did, and it's from Dink and Utamazar. Those are the authors, and the actual article that this was from was Investigating Student Teachers' Conceptions of Social Studies through the Multidimensional Structure of the Epistemological Beliefs. So those are the factors that play into a role as far as implicit bias. Also, we discussed that competent leaders need to require that teachers be culturally responsible. And when we talk about implicit bias, we are discussing how those particular beliefs affect the classroom. So when we talk about bias, it can be gender, it can be racial, it can be sexual orientation stereotypes, but those biases are prevalent in our pre-service teachers that are coming out. For example, from the paper, it says a white teacher may position her body towards a white group of students, and as a result, this may cause the white students to feel more validated by the teacher, thereby enabling the students to participate more in class discussion in comparison to the black students. Also, like I said, it talks about teachers can make an unconscious bias just by validating the students through eye contact. For example, from our research, it says that unconscious bias can even cause pre-service teachers to look at certain groups a certain way before they even really get to know them. From the research, an example was maybe the unconscious bias of a teacher may see black students as more disruptive. Therefore, the pre-service teachers may feel as though they have to be a little bit more strict, or they have to look for if the black students may be potentially causing any type of disruptions in the classroom.
That's interesting because, understandably, this can create backlash or timidity in students who feel like they're being targeted or, picked on, even though the teachers may be unconsciously doing it.
It also talks about bias as in regards to stereotypes about men and women. For instance, if you were raised to think that men are natural born leaders and women should be followers, then that could play into a role into the classroom by encouraging the young men to step up to the plate, for instance, or step up and join particular organizations, or you could just be calling on them more in regards to them taking leadership roles.
So in other words, self-efficacy can be affected by unconscious biases. Kind of makes me wonder how these biases play into gender identity. What are your thoughts on that?
Implicit bias can also be manifested through a teacher's actions towards a student who identifies as LGBTQ. The teacher may not agree with the student's sexual orientation. As a result, the teacher may indirectly make a negative statement as it pertains to a student who identifies as LGBTQ. So
So the research unequivocally recognizes that there are biases in the classroom.
we know there's bias.
Absolutely.
The research says it's bias. Some of the references that we have is from T. Benson Fierman, which is talking
It's
about
6
unconscious
o'clock.
bias in schools. Lanson Billings, which is the article Still Playing in the Dark, Whiteness in the Literacy, Imagination of Children, and Young Adult Literature Teaching.
So when assessing the research question, what can we do about it?
So
Done the action research.
we talked about how those biases affect teaching. It's a subconscious thing. So what can we do? Well, one of the things that we can do is that have pre-service teachers have those conversations about their particular bias, because a lot of times teachers don't even know that they're biased. So, but if we can have those particular conversations, then it allows for pre-service teachers to reflect on their upbringing, how they were raised, how the media portrays certain groups, and that can help facilitate their bias and confront their bias, and they can be more aware of it when they enter the classroom.
That's good stuff, Grady. And to your point about action, we're going to bring in our third member of this tripartite research team to talk a little bit more
Motion
about the
detected at
tools
the
that
front
can
door.
be used to avoid those biases. Right on time. Frederica is going to be wrapping this presentation
at
up
the
for us
front door.
today. And before she gets started, go ahead and introduce yourself for our listeners.
Hi, my name is Frederica Smith, and I will be discussing the data collection tools we will use for our research.
So what is the name of the instrument that you're going to use during the research?
Culturally Responsive Instruction Observation Protocol.
Okay, you said the Culturally Responsive Instruction Observation Protocol. That's a mouthful. Can we call it something else?
Or better known as the CRIOP.
That's a little better. Tell us, what is the CRIOP?
Is a tool to assist the researcher in observing happenings in a classroom. The CRIOP allows the researcher to order thoughts and focus on particular aspects of the culture and climate of the classroom. The CRIOP categorically lists occurrences in a manner that details responsiveness and inclusion. The CRIOP has 7 headings: classroom relationship, assessment practices, curriculum planned learning experiences, pedagogy or instructional practices, discourse instructional conversations, and socio-political consciousness. The CRIOP will also allow the researcher to better understand what observations, as it provides examples of research-based practices that would qualify as responsive. The CRIOP also allows the researcher to note examples during the observations that were counter-responsive. Further, the CRIOP examples will allow the researcher to focus on the purpose of the research and stay faithful to the culturally responsive indicators, or CRI. The examples in the CRIOP also allows the researcher to verify the subject's responses to the self-reported survey.
So in short, you're saying that the CRIOP is used to gauge if a person's answers are genuine, so to speak, relative to uncomfortable questions such as prejudice and biases. What other instruments do you use as a baseline to determine or measure change?
The Cultural Diversity Awareness Inventory, or CDAI, will serve to identify respondents' self-reported beliefs and understanding of one's worldview and perceived stationary replacement of others in comparison to what or that worldview. An example of the use of the CDAI is the Milner Flowers Moore Moore and Flowers, 2003 work that employed the CDAI to illustrate teachers' attitudes related to cultural awareness and sensitivity. The CDAI 28 Likert type items. Participants will choose from a 4-point Likert scale ranging from 1 being strongly agree to 4 being strongly disagree. And by using the CDAI, the researchers will be able to obtain a clearer understanding of participants' perceptions of African American students and the needs to address their own biases and feelings toward the African American male. The researcher will also be able to better identify the beliefs and behaviors of the subjects.
Well, that all makes sense. After collecting the data, what are some things that pre-service teachers can do to avoid biases that they may have about minority students, whether it be intentional or unintentional?
Some of the suggestions for pre-service teachers that encourage African American males are, I'm going to just kind of list them here. 1, let students know you care. 2, share the real you by letting them see you are a real human being. In other words, share your hopes, your dreams, and backgrounds with the student. Number 3 is to have high expectations. 4 is to keep reminding them of the big picture and why what they do in the class is important. So tell them constantly what the short-term and long-term benefits are. Number 5 is to get to know the students on a personal level. And 6 is to make the classroom experience relevant to the real world. So in particular, like emphasize relevance to their communities, right? Number 7 will be to use schema theory. In other words, find out what they already know about the topic that will be covered, and then help the students to link their prior knowledge to the new information. Number 8 is to use storytelling to arouse their interest. All of us love a good story. 9 is to showcase their talent. 10 would be to give students multiple ways to succeed academically. And that will just kind of conclude that list there. So use the data to close the gap. You'll use all of the data to drive planning and instructions. The other thing that you want to do is to become more aware of the role of prejudice, bias, and stereotyping in student lives. Use strategies that will determine students' attitude, environment, or real life experiences, and then become aware of students' attitudes about their learning environment. Use strategies that will motivate the students to reveal his or her feelings about their environment, and ultimately, change the student's attitude about learning or their environment. Praise any accomplishments and not just academic achievements. Incorporate examples of distinguished minorities and their contributions. Include racial and ethnic background and culture of the school into classroom lessons. This will ensure equitable academic attention. Differentiates instructions to increase participation in daily activities. Incorporate the student's background and culture into the instruction. Make those connections and build the backgrounds using multiculturalism. All of this will raise their awareness of the African American culture. A survey for students and parents to find out more about their students will also be useful. This will increase the parents' involvement within the classroom and will increase communication towards ensuring each child reaches expectations and standards. So some of the recommendations and implications for further research that we discovered: the teacher's education department should come up with an invention intervention program to transform the naive epistemological beliefs of pre-service teachers to sophisticated epistemological beliefs. A possible extension of an activity that could help rectify this issue is to look into other factors that may affect the epistemological beliefs of pre-service teachers. A follow-up study can also be conducted looking at the epistemological beliefs of the respondents when they become professional teachers, and then already immersed in a real classroom. So, using those stats there. Thank you for your attention, and I'm going to give it back over to Dean.
So that's our story. We are sticking to it for now, but I hope you enjoy your time. We hope you enjoy your time in Florida. And this concludes our presentation. Make it a great day.